Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I am Wendy Penn, manager of the Housing Opportunity Program for the National Association of Realtors. And just like they tell you on the plane before they leave, they want to make sure you're in the right place. Hopefully you have joined us for an overview of the Transforming Neighborhoods program as we look at 2021. Today, I am joined with Liz Kozub, Associate Director of National Leadership and Education with the Center for Community Progress, Michelle Pointer, the Association Executive for the Central Missouri Board of Realtors, and Veronica Cardello, Field Representative for the Southwest for the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. So I want to give you a little bit of an overview of how the event will go today, as well as a few housekeeping items. The session is being recorded, and we will post it to the realtorparty.realtor/transforming page later today or tomorrow, hopefully, so that you can go back and have a reference and maybe share it with anyone who was not able to attend today. We will start with an overview of what Transforming Neighborhoods is and the offerings available from that program with our partner, the Center for Community Progress. We'll talk about some information regarding the process of applying and what that looks like. And then you'll hear some user experiences. So there'll be some peer-to-peer learning. And so we will have Michelle and Veronica talk about what they went through in terms of preparing themselves and their associations to participate in the program. Just by way of background, Transforming Neighborhoods is a program that we offer in collaboration with the Center for Community Progress to provide realtors the opportunity to work with local government to address vacant, abandoned, and deteriorated properties. We know that those types of problem properties can really be detrimental to communities, and we want to provide resources to help realtors be part of the solution and turning these problem properties back into valuable community assets. So we want to jump right in so we make sure we have plenty of time for question and answer at the end. You are welcome to submit your questions in the chat as we go. I will give you a heads up and say that a lot of the technical questions in terms of the program offerings and how you go about applying for the program and what to expect, Liz and I will cover in our presentation. So you may want to hold those types of questions until she and I finish speaking, because there's a good chance we'll touch on what your question is. But certainly if you have questions for Michelle or Veronica as they're speaking, you're welcome to put those in the chat and we'll get to those at the end. Or we'll certainly give you the opportunity to raise your hand so you can be unmuted and talk directly to us during that question and answer portion. And so now I'm going to turn things over to Liz.
Great, thanks so much, Wendy. So at Community Progress, we are a national nonprofit that works in partnerships with community to find solutions to addressing vacant, abandoned, and deteriorated properties, as Wendy mentioned. You might hear me say the word VAD throughout this presentation. I'm referring to those properties, the vacant, abandoned, and deteriorated. It's just a lot shorter and a lot easier. And I know most of us working in any field love a good acronym. So that is what I'm speaking about. So Community Progress was formed in 2010 in Flint, Michigan, in response to the influx of vacant properties that came about because of the housing crisis. We also have a national headquarters in Washington, D.C. In the past 10 years, Community Progress has worked in over 300 communities in over 35 states, including the island of Puerto Rico, to really develop innovative solutions to address vacant and abandoned properties. We are a national leader in tools and strategies to address vacancy, which include land banking, code enforcement, tax enforcement, and other tools that address the full cycle of property revitalization. Our work is centered on equity. We know that today's struggling neighborhoods that are challenged by systemic vacancy and disinvestment, concentrated poverty, and weak housing markets have racially disparate outcomes and are a lasting legacy of these unjust policies. So we center that commitment and understanding to equity in all the work that we do. We work in communities by offering a number of different programs. So our education program supports connecting partners from the private sector, the public sector, residents that are most impacted by vacant properties, to really networks of opportunities of learning to expand understanding about what's possible to address these problems. Our technical assistance team dives really deep into the policies and processes, data sources, using data to better understand challenges and ways to move forward. We also have a policy and research team that works at the federal and state level to develop new policies and advocate for resources that communities can use to address vacancy. So as Wendy mentioned, part of the goal of the Transforming Neighborhoods program is to build common knowledge and understanding between realtors, local government partners, and community stakeholders, and really to address and create effective solutions to addressing vacancy. So we are so thrilled to be able to partner with NAR again this year on the Transforming Neighborhoods program. We started really our work with NAR in 2017. The Transforming Neighborhoods program has really evolved based on the feedback that we've received from associations and their local government partners, and really hope to be able to provide some valuable services to you all in 2021. At the end of the day, our hope is to really build strong partnerships between realtors and local government partners in order to advance cooperative reforms for the future. So in 2021, which is kind of crazy to say since we've all been talking about 2020 so frequently, but next year through the Transforming Neighborhoods program, we're going to be offering 2 services, which is education and training and technical assessments. I'm going to go into greater detail about each of those in just a moment, and you'll also hear from Michelle and Veronica about their experience by participating in the program. So during the application process, we're going to ask respondents to let us know what service they're most interested in receiving. Education and training is really ideal for those communities that are looking to build a broad coalition and common understanding surrounding vacancy. So this is perfect for associations whose members are interested in learning more about the systems that contribute to vacancy and tools to support equitable revitalization. The trainings are also a great opportunity to network and develop partnerships and strengthen partnerships between realtors and local government partners.
I'm trying to turn this down.
The technical assessments are ideal for those communities that already have existing commitments to addressing bad properties. There should be strong partnerships between realtors and local government partners. A smaller group of stakeholders will be engaged in the assessments, but the engagements will go deeper to look at specific policies and processes and offer recommendations for moving forward. So there are a number of strategies to address bad properties in communities. At Community Progress, we focus on the areas that you see on your screen. So if you're selected into the program, we will work with your association and your city to narrow down the topics that will be a focus for either the educational event or for the assessment. So for using data to strengthen neighborhood interventions, we can look at how to use data, what data is important, what it tells us about the condition and challenges in your community, and how we can plan accordingly to move forward. For strategic code enforcement, we can talk about programs and policies that can respond to the varying needs of neighborhoods. For rental regulations, we could talk about different strategies, including registration and licensing programs that can help to identify or improve rental property conditions. For property tax systems, this typically is policy at the state level, but making sure that tax policy can contribute to stabilization and doesn't exacerbate the problem. For vacant land reuse, we can talk about planning and implementing effective strategies for small and large scale vacant land reuse initiatives. And lastly, community coalition building is really looking at who else needs to be in conversations and at decision-making tables, making sure that revitalization is equitable with a strong focus on making sure those most impacted by bad properties are part of the solution. So as I mentioned earlier, our work is really centered on equity. Our country has a long and unjust policies that have contributed to a myriad of issues that struggling communities face. So while our focus is on vacancy abandonment, it's just one symptom of a larger problem that plays out differently in different communities. So Community Progress will bring experts to your community that have years and decades of experience in addressing vacant properties. We'll center equity, we'll draw on our experiences and pull from lessons learned from communities all across the country. But at the end of the day, we are outsiders. So we ask that the engagement, that all parties remain transparent and flexible and committed to inclusive community development. All right. So that's kind of the high level overview of the program. Now I'm going to provide more information about each of the 2 services that we'll be offering and what you all can expect if you are selected. So for the education and training, we will work with NAR and the association and local government partners that has been selected to build out an agenda, drawing from a Community Progress training curriculum. And it will focus on those areas I just mentioned: data, code enforcement, rental regulation, tax enforcement, land banking, vacant land reuse, and community coalition building. We will ask the association and local government partners to invite a wide range of stakeholders for the 1-day training. So also, there's so much unknown in 2021, so we'll make a decision as to whether or not that training will be in person or virtual with all parties involved, based on the timing and CDC guidelines and the internal policies of all of our organizations. So if accepted into the program, there will be an initial planning call with association representatives and local government partners to identify challenges and bring into focus the area that we want to really discuss as part of the training. So that's that initial planning call. We will ask for the planning group to arrange calls with 1 to 2 key local government partners to help us and our team prepare for that training. So for example, if we're focusing on strategic code enforcement, it's going to be really important that Community Progress talks with somebody in your code enforcement department at the city, just so we have an understanding of what challenges they face, what programs they're implementing, what's working and what's not working for them, and kind of the baseline understanding of what it is that they're doing. We're not going to fully understand all of the challenges in your community with those 1 to 2 conversations. And so we're not going to be able to offer specific recommendations about what your community should be doing or what policies you should be changing. Instead, the training is really focused on providing information about what works well across the country, drawing on case studies from similarly situated communities, and engaging in conversation and building consensus around the problem and ways to move forward. We also ask for a local practitioner to speak at some point during that training. This is really powerful, just to have some local context and grounding as well. Just by way of example, again, when we have conversations around data, local leaders can point to exactly what data they have, what it's telling them about their community, and how they're planning to use that data to make decisions. And that really complements our work on talking about what data is needed, how that data can be used to develop strategic and effective approaches for moving forward. So those are those local context conversations. We will finalize the agenda in partnership with the association. We will ask the association to invite attendees to the training. Community Progress will provide support in terms of who should be involved in the training, what that invitation language can look like in registration, but we do ask that the association invite folks to attend, and then the association to provide logistical support on the day of the training. This is especially important if it is in person, because we do need support in terms of securing event location, AV equipment, lunch, and things of that nature, which we'll talk about in a few more minutes. So on your screen is an agenda for a training we did with the Realtors Association of Westmoreland, Indiana, and Mon Valley in Western PA. Veronica is going to talk about her experience with that training and the work that they've done since then, but just wanted to provide an example of what a training agenda could look like. All right, so for technical assessments, for this engagement, we will dive deeper into the existing practices and policies within your community, offer observations that we've gleaned, and recommendations that can help strengthen your revitalization efforts. So it's important for local government to be a strong partner in both types of engagements, but it's absolutely critical for the assessments because of the level of information and coordination that's required to really produce a valuable assessment. The final product will be in the form of a deliverable, a report, a memo, something that will be agreed upon by all parties. So this process is similar, although there is a lot more conversation and engagement that happens between the association, local government partner, and community progress. So much of the work in addressing bad properties is pretty nuanced. We might go into an initial planning call thinking the area of focus is going to be code enforcement, but after a few conversations, we discover the problem is really the delinquent tax foreclosure process. So we might have a few planning calls to really narrow down what the focus of the engagement is going to be, guided by conversations with the association and the key city partner. We will ask the association and the city partner to recommend key people, key departments, key community members to talk to for stakeholder interviews. So again, it depends on the direction of the engagement about who we want to talk to, but it's likely going to include folks from the city, potentially folks from the county, key cooperative organizations like a land bank or a community development corporation, realtors, of course, and community members most impacted by problem properties. We're also going to ask that the city share data with us. So we'll send specific data requests about what it is that we're looking for and why it's going to be helpful to our work. And then we'll have a few local planning group check-ins just so community progress can share informally what we're hearing and learning and give the association and the city an opportunity to kind of gut check some of those responses. Then there will be a final deliverable and a discussion that happens when that is delivered. So 2020 was the first year that we offered technical assessments. 3 communities were recipients of that service. As you can see on your screen, they all took on a little bit of a different flavor, and that was based on the conversations that we had with each of the partners. So Michelle is going to talk about her experience in just a few moments in terms of working on and leading on behalf of the association, the technical assessment in Marshall, Missouri. So in terms of the application process, a successful applicant will really have coordinated with local government partners prior to completing the application in order to answer some of the questions that are included in the application package. So for those seeking technical assessments, we do require a letter of support from a chief executive. So this could either be a mayor or a city manager, and we just ask that they commit to the project if the association and city are selected for the program. NAR and Community Progress will review all of the applications that we receive and will request interviews with a handful of finalists. These interviews will just give us an opportunity to hear more about your challenges and to really determine if this program is a right fit for your group. We ask that association reps and the city partner is involved in those interviews during that time. So if selected into the program, Community Progress and NAR will propose the service that we think will be most valuable for your community based on your conversations that we have and based on the feedback that we receive through your application. We will then develop a scope of work, and all parties will agree as to what it is we're going to be doing over a few months span of time before we actually start the work. So on your screen are a sampling of questions that will be included in the application. These are just a few, and they could change slightly. But we're really looking for applicants that have demonstrated partnerships between realtors and local governments, that have a commitment to equity and really ensuring that inclusive community development is a priority for your community, and that has demonstrated need. There has to be challenges with vacant and abandoned properties in your community in order for us to really have a fruitful engagement. So again, we strongly encourage participants to connect with local government partners to complete the application and gain valuable insights before responding. So in terms of commitments for the program, NAR generously will be providing the cost to cover the engagement with Community Progress. We do expect realtors associations to also commit to certain expenses and support throughout the program. So those expenses include items related to an event, so venue rental, catering, any type of marketing that's needed for that in-person training, if that is the program that's selected. We do require that the association remain in strong contact with Community Progress throughout the engagement for both engagements. So providing administrative, logistical support, feedback on agendas, feedback on invitations, and interviews and things of that nature. It's also really important for the association to ensure that support from local government partners to make sure we really have a fruitful and valuable engagement. So with that, I will turn it over to Wendy.
Great, thank you, Liz. I appreciate you giving that very thorough overview of what is entailed in the program, because sometimes I know when you hear a name like Transforming Neighborhoods, it doesn't exactly tell you what it is. So it's helpful to have that information. So I'm going to move through this slide pretty quickly. I do just want to highlight a few things that I think are important for you to be thinking about in terms of how you might approach your association about their interest in applying. Just in terms of the application timeline, we do expect to launch the application in January. So really just in about a month or so, you could be on the lookout for that. And we will certainly promote that the application is open in all the places where you probably saw information about this webinar. So it will go in the AEINS, it'll go in the Gadfly, on the Hub, and in the Facebook groups for your respective groups. So we will widely disseminate the information that it's available. And then from that point, you'll have probably about 6 weeks to complete the application, and we will communicate that exact date. Please note that is a hard deadline, and all applications will be reviewed at one time. So we have to have all the applications in at once just because of the process that Liz explained in terms of how we go through selecting the recipients of these engagements. So it's really important to adhere to that deadline because we will not be able to offer extensions. And so if you're thinking about applying, as Liz said, it's important, required if you want to do a technical assessment to have that letter of support from the city. So it would be a good idea to have those conversations now just to give them a heads up that you might be coming to them, or to start thinking through whether or not this is a good fit for your city. Because really, it's not enough just for the association to be interested in participating. There has to be that close collaboration with the city. A couple of other things that I wanted to point out in terms of level of commitment. As you probably gathered based on what Liz shared, this is a time-consuming process. The end result is something that is going to be really useful to your city, to your association, but there is a lot of work that goes into it, not only from the project leader from Center for Community Progress, but from the association and from the city. So that is definitely something to take into consideration as you're thinking about whether or not this is something you want to try to do next year. Think about it in terms of staffing, and will there be a point of contact from the association who can follow the program through all the way from the beginning to the end, and being sure that someone from the city is committed as well to be that main point of contact. Particularly for the technical assessments, you'll find that there needs to be contact with many different departments and many different people, but it'll be critical to have one person who can coordinate all that and be the main point of contact for the community progress project lead and for the that same contact for the association. In terms of financial contribution or commitment from the association, as Liz pointed out, these engagements cost anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000, depending on what is selected, and NAR does cover that full cost. I do want to point out, though, that this is not a grant program. It's a little different from the other community outreach grants that you might be familiar with, like Housing Opportunity or Smart Growth. So it's different in the sense that there's not a reimbursement process. We don't expect you to come up with $20,000 and then us pay you back later. We pay those fees directly to Center for Community Progress for the work that they do. And unlike the grant programs, there's not a requirement for a specific percentage match from the association to participate. But there is a financial contribution in terms of, as Liz said, if there's some kind of event that's connected, if you do a training, the association is responsible for renting the venue, securing the AV, the catering, any printing of materials, those sorts of things required for that event, the association is responsible for, and that does need to come from the association's budget. You would not be able to apply for a different NAR grant or program to pay for that. So definitely take that into consideration as well, that it would be a financial commitment on the association's part in some way, even though NAR is covering the bulk, is covering the cost of the actual engagement. Real quickly, I will mention additional resources and learning opportunities. These engagements do take quite a bit of time. It's a several-month commitment, and because of that, there is limited capacity. We have in 2021 the capacity for about 4 or 5 engagements. So it could be a combination of place-based trainings and technical assessments, but probably 4 or 5 will definitely be the max. So keep that in mind, that there's a chance that you would apply and might not get picked. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other learning opportunities. And sometimes it might not be a fit because maybe the city isn't ready. Maybe there's not quite the political will necessary to move things forward. But what you can do is, if you were not selected for 2021, or if you already know you're not ready for 2021, is to use this year to plant some seeds so you could be ready going forward. And some opportunities that we have for learning include a webinar series that we're planning for 2021. Where we'll talk about some of these issues that relate to strategies that can go into improving the challenges of vacancy and abandonment. There's a recording already of a 4-part webinar series that we did in 2020 that's available on the Realtor Party site. So you can use these as a way to engage local officials. If you need to get them on board, you can invite them to participate with you live on the 2021 trainings. You could send them a link to the ones that we already have and use that as a way to start a conversation and maybe get them ready to move forward the following year. Also later in 2021, we'll have a resource that will be a nice collection of success stories and lessons learned from all the associations who have participated in the program up to that point. So again, that will be another tool for you if you are not ready to move forward with the program, or you might discover that you don't necessarily need a full engagement. You might just need some resources to help guide some work that you're already doing. So we do want to make sure you're aware that participating in a training or an assessment is not the only way that you can be engaged in Transforming Neighborhoods program, that we do have other resources there. And so I just left the website there, the realtorparty.realtor/transforming, which is where you can get all the program information. That will be where the application form is linked when that goes live. So that'll just be your home base for everything for this program. So you definitely want to make sure you check there frequently for updates. When we finish all the technical assessments from this year, they'll be posted there. The one that Michelle is going to talk about in a few minutes from Marshall, Missouri is already posted. You could take a look at that to get a sense of what that looks like. And the agendas from last year's trainings are there, so you could see those and see what was covered in that. So now we're going to get to the really good stuff, and you'll get to hear from your peers and listen to what their experience was like. So first, I'm going to call on Michelle Pointer with the Central Missouri Board of Realtors and ask her to share with us just from the beginning. Michelle, start from the beginning. How did you get interested in Transforming Neighborhoods? How did you hear about it? And then just walk us through that experience a little bit. And so I'm going to mute myself and turn things over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Wendy. Well, back in 2019, the city of Marshall tried implementing an ordinance which covered rental property and property for sale. It was a very detailed ordinance that was just way above and beyond as far as being able to sell a piece of property. This would have been on top of our third-party inspections. I've been a realtor for 35 years on top of being in the AE for the Central Missouri Board for the last 11 years. So we fought that, but at the same time, we told the city we want to help you figure out a way to make this work for you, because the mayor and several of the councilmen ran on cleaning up Marshall and moving Marshall forward. Well, how do you go about, there's 5 landlords that they need help with, but they were going to punish, all the landlords and the sellers and everybody else with this ordinance. So on March 4th, I was reading the NAR Hub when I saw the Transferring Neighborhoods grant, and I clicked on it and went to a couple of the agendas that were attached to that email. And there were 2 things in one of those agendas that really stuck out. And it was the vacant, abandoned, and deteriorated properties that were stuck in decline and ways to address those properties. And the other paragraph was about the severe negative impact on the neighborhoods and the people, including the economic, social, physical, and environmental, the way people were living. So I immediately, because this was what the mayor and I had been talking about, and when she wanted to put this ordinance through. So I immediately called the mayor, who is part-time mayor, so she has a full-time job. And I called her at her job and I said, do you have 15 minutes for me? And she said, absolutely. And I kind of explained this to her. So I made a copy of the agenda. I ran to Marshall, met with her, told her about it to see if she thought the city council would be on board. She said, absolutely. So then I came back, I immediately emailed my board of directors asking permission to apply for this grant, that the city was willing to partner with us. And then on March 9th, I met with the mayor and the city administrator, and we kind of talked about both of them. And we decided to apply for the technical assessment, because our real issue was the codes were there. They just weren't being enforced, or something was breaking down along the line. So that's where we needed to find out, where to go from there. To look over the existing policies and the processes and the tools to address our vacant and abandoned properties. Then COVID hit. And originally the application was due April 1st. And so then they pushed it to May 1st, which was fantastic. But in the meantime, I had copy and pasted the application, because it's one that you do online and you can't stop and save and restart. You have to do the whole thing and then submit it. So I copy and pasted that application to Word, and I sent that to the mayor, the city administrator, our code enforcement officer, and they sent it to other community people that they thought needed to be involved, so that I could get that filled out and sent back. Went through that process. It's kind of a fake it till you make it, because you're not really sure what to put on the application, but you know what's wrong and what needs to be fixed. So then we had the meeting, like Liz talked about, to determine if we were going to get the grant or not. But then Karen Black, who was with Community Progress, met with us via Zoom, and with the mayor and the city administrator and our code enforcement officer, and then the other people that she wanted to interview. So one of the things in that first meeting that we discovered was that the city had actually appointed a judge and a prosecutor for the city to help get these enforcement, you know, when a ticket was given for deteriorated property that wasn't going through the court system. So there was a breakdown there. We had to find out why it wasn't working. And I mean, Karen was just absolutely fantastic to work with. The mayor and I had a little different ideas than the city manager or city administrator and the code enforcement officer did. And we kind of all came to an agreement on that. And it was just absolutely a fantastic process. And our assessment, we got it back on November 11th. And I think the city is as anxious as I am to see how we as realtors can help them put some of these suggestions into effect. And that's the great part about it, because some of the suggestions that they made, the community progress made to the city are things that the realtors can help them with. You know, how to, you know, when somebody's buying a piece of property and how to keep your rental property up, you know, a brochure, just something simple like that. So it was a great experience for me. And I thoroughly appreciate NAR and Community Progress for letting us have that grant.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. We appreciate you giving that feedback. And it was very exciting for me as well, because as Liz said, this is the first year we've offered technical assessments as part of this program. So while it was something that Liz has seen in her work, because that's what Center for Community Progress does, it was my first experience seeing one come from beginning to end. There are a couple of other associations who are in the process of completing theirs, but so it was a very fulfilling experience for me as well to have been on those initial calls and to see the collaboration between you and the mayor and all of the players on those calls that we had, and then to have that document in the end and have Karen walk through those recommendations and kind of see some of those ahas, and we get it when we had that call to talk through it. So it is exciting. And it really is, it's a starting point. So when an association does this type of project, the end is not this engagement. It really is the beginning of new things that the association can go into with the city. So I think that's one of the things that's really most exciting. So thank you for sharing your experience.
Thank you all.
Great. So next I'm going to call on Veronica, who I mentioned earlier is with the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, and her area covers several associations. One of them is the Realtors Association of Westmoreland, Indiana, and Mon Valley, and they were a recipient of a place-based training in 2019. And Veronica, you can go ahead and start sharing your screen. And it was actually a place-based training. It was in place because it was 2019. So that was a fun experience. So I'm glad we had the opportunity to do that. So now I'll turn that over to you, Veronica. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Wendy. So as mentioned before, I am Veronica Cardello. I am the Southwest Political Field Representative for the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. So I do work with 6 different local associations, and we did the place-based training with the Realtors Association of Westmoreland, Indiana, and Mon Valley. So I'm going to give to you start to finish where we are at today from where we were back in 2018. So back in 2018, everything started for us with the association because the city of Greensburg actually had a vacant property ordinance already on the books. And when you're looking at protecting private property rights, this vacant property ordinance actually required a lot of different code enforcement techniques, if you will, and requirements to be done and completed within 30 to 45 days. So it was really strenuous on our realtors. And so we were trying to talk to the city to see if we could amend that ordinance, and they weren't budging. So then that same year, they put in a Red X program. And if you're familiar with the Red X program, it's for fire departments to identify vacant and abandoned buildings whenever they're going out and making sure that it was vacant and abandoned. So that program actually increased the amount of crime in the city and also the amount of noticeable drug use in the city. And that was because since these homes were already marked with big red X's, the offenders, if you will, thought it was okay to go into these homes and do whatever illegal activity that they were doing. So we testified to the city saying, hey, we really think this is a bad idea because we can't help build this community if we have this program in place. And they weren't going to budge on that either. So then they put in a sign usage ordinance that limited all of our signage in terms of real estate signs and political signs and all these other signs that you can think of to literally 2 square feet. You were only allowed to have a 2 square foot sign. And we all know that our signs are bigger than 2 square feet. So that one actually we defeated because we explained to them that we have the rules and regulations that we have to adhere to from the Real Estate Commission, and it just wasn't going to work. So we won on that one. But moving forward, we were like, okay, how do we actually build a coalition with the city? How do we focus on all of the different pieces that we need to put together so that we don't have ordinances like this impacting us anymore? So I spoke to Holly Moskowitz. She was in charge of smart growth, as well as I spoke to Wendy, I spoke to Hugh Morris, and I spoke to a lot of different NAR staff to see what we could really do to bring everybody together and bridge that divide. So at one point in time, Wendy actually came to me and said, I think this would be a great idea if we put this program in place. And I said, okay, well, what does this program mean? So at that point in time, we had talked to Liz with the Center for Community Progress to see what really was the crux of the issue. And so we had settled on applying for the Transforming Neighborhoods program. And it was really late 2018, early 2019, so probably about January. And then we actually, based on our application, we were awarded it and we started planning from there. So we hosted the program in June of 2019, but we focused on Westmoreland, Indiana, Mon Valley, and the counties that they service in terms of local data sets. We focused on keeping everything local for our elected officials. Then we also wanted to focus on strategic code enforcement, how we could impact code enforcement, and then opportunity zones, because that was huge in Pennsylvania at the time. So we went out and we invited over 60 Realtor members and community leaders that included solicitors, municipal leaders, county commissioners, the governor's office, state representatives, and ultimately Realtor members to partake in this planning process. So once we actually were boots on the ground and we had everything planned out for our Transforming Neighborhoods seminar, we wanted to take it a step further. We wanted to make sure that we were doing the best due diligence as possible, because it went off with such a success that many of our solicitors had asked us what to do next. So we wanted to put in place a strategic plan. And with that strategic plan, we wanted to kind of make a hybrid of like a Transforming Neighborhoods 2.0, if you will. And we wanted to focus on the community engagement and education aspect of the community, as well as investor involvement in opportunity zones, and then blight concerns and beautification projects, working with city officials. So to do this, we really wanted to focus on the comprehensive plans that were about to be proposed at the city at that point in time, but also at the county level that had already been implemented. So now, where we were from 2018 to hosting the Transforming Neighborhoods program, to how do we in 2019 do something as a continuance. So we had actually got together as a government affairs committee and said, we want to do another seminar, but at this point in time, we wanted to include the universities, we wanted to include the Chamber of Commerce, and ultimately community members, and we wanted to make it twice as big this time. So unfortunately, COVID hit. So we had ultimately planned for doing a Transforming Neighborhood Seminar 2.0 in May of this year, and it wasn't going to happen because by the time we started planning, we were very behind the 8 ball because our state had been shut down at that point. So we couldn't do anything. But what we were able to do is we worked with the city of Greensburg virtually, and we helped to develop a city comprehensive plan, implement the county comprehensive plan, and then ultimately create more partnerships, because we were able to tap into Zoom and use it to our advantage. So if we're following the timeline, we then decided this year, since we couldn't do a Transforming Neighborhood Seminar 2.0, we would apply for a housing opportunity grant to have a blight study conducted, because that was one of the pieces of information that was really critical for us in our partnership with the city, but we never actually took that step to have it done. So when we got together with the city, we said, hey, why don't we put in this application and see where it goes from there? So the blight study that we wanted to have done ultimately really wanted to focus on different components. And those components were having a blight inventory, but also having a blight remediation strategy. We just didn't want to stop at having an inventory. So when we talked to the city about applying for the housing opportunity grant and what that would actually look like, we had talked to them about the different goals and the different strategies that they wanted to implement. So we sat down with city officials and we said, we need to make a list of all the things that we have going on within the city. So we knew that we were working on the blight study, but there was also a transportation component that different committee members were working on, and then also Parks and Rec master plan that another committee was working on. So we wanted to make sure that we incorporated all of this into what we were really going to do ultimately for the city, and how the comprehensive plan was going to be updated to include all of this. So once we started stitching things together, we realized what the actual cost was going to be. So we sat down and we said about the inventory. This is a map of the city of Greensburg, this is actually a map of the city of Greensburg, and it was going to cost anywhere between $10,000 and $30,000 for us to have it completed. So then the strategy, the blight remediation strategy, so step 2 is going to cost anywhere between $10,000 and $30,000. And we knew that the city wasn't going to be able to afford it. So how were we going to go about it? So when we did apply for the housing opportunity grant, it was exciting because we were able to pick up a portion of that from the city for the inventory portion. But then we also, in the meantime, worked with the county, and the county is doing the strategy portion for us. So that was really exciting. That was a huge win for us. So if you're keeping track, here we are now. So we're looking at 2021, where the inventory is actually going to start taking place. So they're going to start hitting the ground running in January. And the Westmoreland County Planning Department is going to spearhead that for us here in Westmoreland County. And then in 2022, we're actually going to have the comprehensive plan that's going to be finalized, and then the remediation strategy finalized as well. So we're going to be able to implement that in the latter half of 2022. So where we were at in 2018 to where we are today is completely unimaginable, because we didn't think that we were going to be able to have those conversations with city officials and make that connection from the realtor's perspective to all of our elected officials at that point in time. But I can tell you with confidence, as long as you're persistent, as long as you have the resources and you reach out, you can absolutely do anything that you set your mind to, because this is what my association has done just in between Westmoreland and Indiana County. And this is not including what we're working on in the latter half of southwestern Pennsylvania. So.
Great. Thank you, Veronica, for sharing that. And I really love the visual that you put up there, because it does, I think, a great job of showing that this type of work really does take time. And I know that that's not news to anyone on the call, but in terms of how Transforming Neighborhoods fits in there, I think it was great that you explained to us what was going on in the background before this opportunity to do the training in 2019 even came about. So what was happening in 2018, and then what you all were able to do after. And I will point out, just so that no one is confused, when Veronica referred to Transforming Neighborhoods 2.0, that was not part of this NAR engagement with Community Progress. This is an initiative that they did on their own, that was not supported by NAR or Community Progress. This is something that, based on, I would like to think, some of the momentum they gained from that training, they were able to kind of take that Transforming Neighborhoods name. People recognized it from being in the room at that training in June of 2019, and they were able to leverage that to say, well, let's have an extension of that, and then so on and so on and so on. So I think that's great. And I think, the thing that is similar to what Michelle pointed out in both cases is you see that there's already a relationship there with the city. There are already conversations going on about these issues, and Transforming Neighborhoods was able to come in at the right time to help facilitate broadening those discussions. So we do have about 10 minutes left for questions. I don't see any in the chat yet, but you are welcome to type something in there, or you could just raise your hand so that we see you, and you can then unmute yourself and ask a question of either Veronica or Michelle or myself or Liz.
Wendy, if I could actually start, because I did get a private question.
Sure.
Two-part question. Is there a level of vacancy and a minimum population that's needed to apply? The answer to both is no. In this year, we worked in Marshall, Missouri, and the population is escaping me, but it's very different than the city of Chicago, which is where we're also working. And so level of population is not a requirement. And level of vacancy isn't either. We do want to see that the community does struggle with systemic vacancy. So we're not, at Community Progress, we don't offer parcel specific solutions. So we're not going to say like, this is what you can do with this grocery store or with this vacant house. We want to see that there is some community-wide challenges that exist so that we can offer some solutions through education or the assessments that say these are the policy changes that need to take place to address those. The second part of that was, can it be done countywide or only within a specific city? I think Veronica gave a really great example of multiple county coordination that happened with the Transforming Neighborhoods training that was led by the regional association. In terms of assessments, it is a little easier to do it at the city level because that's where a lot of the policies and processes take place. Although I mentioned there are some tools that are more regional, like land banking, tax enforcement. So we can certainly talk about those tools at a county level, but it is kind of specific to the request.
Great, thank you. And I do see a question, does this apply to commercial properties as well? So I will start that and then let Liz finish up and just say that yes. And for example, this year, the Chicago Association of Realtors is getting a technical assessment, and their focus is specifically on several corridors where there are a lot of commercial properties that are vacant, where the owner is paying the taxes, but otherwise not doing much else to it. But I will let Liz go into a little more detail in terms of what this process and deliverable look like when it is focused mainly on commercial.
Sure. So yes, Chicago was, their identified need was challenges with commercial corridors. We had that as an area of focus because it tied really strongly to an existing city strategy to invest in certain neighborhoods within the city. Many of the policy recommendations that we provide are not property use specific. They're changes to address challenges regardless of what the use of the property is. But a lot of our process level work does differ between, residential, owner occupied residential. We want to make sure that we're providing equitable solutions to ensure folks stay in their home versus, a vacant commercial property. Those process recommendations will look a little different.
Great, thank you. And there is a question that says, are you able to share some of the examples of the policy resolutions that were a product of the assessment? Specifically, can we ensure that policies do not unfairly cause undue burden on existing owners? And I'm going to ask Michelle to speak to that a little bit. I assume that that question might be about the assessment you all received. So could you respond to that?
Absolutely. Our fear when they tried to put the original ordinance through in 2019 was that it was going to put undue burden on our sellers and property owners. So we were trying to find a way to appease us as realtors and our buyers and sellers, and the city, and how they could deal with their code enforcement at the same time. So as it turns out, we are a town of, I think our population's like 13,000. we didn't have as many vacant properties as they thought we had, but it ended up not putting a burden on most of the sellers. You know, there's the landlords or the owners of the property that have those consistent code violations, you know, that they're always getting ticketed for. And one of the suggestions was, instead of just, you know, doing that one house that you get a complaint on, to do all the ones that that homeowner owns or that landlord owns. And so I think that it takes the burden off the owners or the landlords. I hope that answers the question. I'm not sure it did.
Great. No, thank you. That was a good example. So I will say just one or two things, and then maybe if Liz has anything to add. First, I will say that the assessment that came out of this for Marshall, Missouri, and for the Central Missouri Realtors is available, is posted on realtorparty.realtor/transforming. So you can actually take a look at that and look at the recommendations that came out of that. And, you know, one of the reasons the engagement between the Realtor Association and the city and Community Progress is important is so that realtors can bring to light some of those concerns that they do have, that property owners might have, and making sure that any strategies that are considered do not unfairly burden a homeowner. So the idea really is to think of a comprehensive way that is fair, that takes property owners' rights into consideration. And again, it's a list of recommendations that then the city and the other stakeholders can work through together. So, and Liz, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Just from a high level, our goal is really to find solutions for those properties that are causing most significant harm to communities. So those are the vacant, abandoned, you know, bricks falling on the sidewalk, properties where there's negligent owners that are just disrespectful of the community quality and conditions. So we take the approach that we do not want to cause undue burden on homeowners, owner occupants, folks with limited resources that don't have the ability to upkeep their properties, and really target those efforts to those causing most harm.
Can I add one more thing? And
Yes,
if you go to the assessment, you know, the final thing, it also suggested that the city work with a bank or with someone to try to get a grant program going to help those landlords, you know, that don't have the extra money. My example is always, you know, a single mother with 3 kids, and she has no equity in her house and can't afford to put a new roof on or fix the outside or fix the inside, you know, and that's what we as realtors would like to be able to go in and help with. But the Community Progress people suggested that, and then trying to figure out a way to get a grant program that homeowners can apply for if they have deteriorated property that's really an eyesore and they need help with it. And that's part of where we come in as realtors to help them with it.
Great, thank you, Michelle. I don't see any more questions in the main chat. Liz, did any come to you directly? Nope, okay. So I'll make a final call. If there are any questions that you want to add to the chat, or if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question, I think we have time for maybe one more. Nope. But if not, I will just remind you, if you could check the chat, there is a link that's in there directly to that landing page for Transforming Neighborhoods, where you can find additional information, kind of a recap of everything we discussed. We will post the recording of this session up there within the next day or so if you want to refer back to it or share it with anyone who wasn't able to participate. That will also be the place where you want to check in January to see when that application is ready. But again, just be on the lookout for all of the normal communication places that we reach you for that information. And I would just, again, I want to encourage you that if this is something that is of interest to you, you're welcome to contact me directly. I will throw my contact information in the chat real quick before we log off, but it's just wpen@nar.realtor. You can shoot me an email if you have a specific question or something comes to you that didn't occur to you while you were on the call. And just, I'm so appreciative of Michelle and Veronica taking time to be on the call today to share their experience with you, because it's more important, I think, to hear from your peer about what their experience was, what they heard from their members, how things are working, because that really shows you how these programs can fit and work with you and your association. And also thank you to Liz and Community Progress for being such a great partner. It has been personally fulfilling to see how this program has evolved over the past few years, from a pilot program in 2016 to some initial ones in 17, and then what we were able to offer today. So thank you so much for your time today. Stay safe and happy holidays. And I look forward to seeing some great applications in January. Thank you.